and we're really excited about it. It's a very complex piece of software that I'm really excited about. It's a webGPU system. So webGPU is something not a lot of people are familiar with. It's a browser system that was kind of created by the browser consortium like Google and some of those companies, Google, Apple, and a few others. And webGPU is, I think, going to take over the way we do AI and GPUs. We've spent the last few years working with GPUs, and I think everything is going to change over the next year or two. I think we're going to stop using GPUs on the server, and we're going to move to the edge. And if you look at the history of computing, that tends to have happened every time. And I feel like there's a sea change just about to happen here as well. And we're at this weird point in this curve where, in essence, there's kind of just sort of I guess, 2 points crossing or two curves crossing where the amount of compute we need and the amount of compute that we can get are crossing very shortly. So if you want to do image gen, for example, you used to kind of have to do that on a server, and now it's gotten to the point where any GPU can do it. And part of that is software advancements, part of that's hardware advancements. But I more and more don't see the need for high-powered GPUs. I think training models is a bit of a different story. It's really interesting. I started off by saying on our last call that 80% of AI is training and 20% is inference. And both NVIDIA and a few other people have disputed that it's closer to 50-50. I still don't think that's quite true, but I do think in the future that probably is going to be the case. So inference is something that is, I think, going to be done at the edge. Obviously, proprietary models sort of have to live on a server somewhere, but there are many, many models that are not proprietary. Llama, Stable Diffusion, and so forth, Mixtral. And I think that probably some of the best models will be open source. So ultimately, for some percentage of inference use cases, we can do inference on the edge. No system is going to solve everything. I think there's a lot of people in crypto or even AI without crypto, but especially in crypto, that want to sort of solve everything. And I just don't think that's really realistic. I think federated training is something that eventually will happen, but I don't think I'm going to solve it, for one. Or I don't really see anybody else likely to solve it soon either. But I do think federated training is possible, and the literature is full of papers about it, including just today there were a bunch of papers about federated training. But inference is a lot easier to handle. So I think we'll do inference on the edge, especially for cases where open source is okay or preferred, and then also cases where privacy and other matters like that are relatively contained. So we gave an example today by launching this image gen app called Shoggoth. And I think you're going to see more and more models launch like this. And some of the people at Hugging Face, including Zenova and a few others, really talented people, are putting out webGPU-based models. It's a very small community right now. That's really nice, since it allows us to talk to Google's head of webGPU and stuff like that. But I think this is going to be just as important as WASM and even just JavaScript as a whole. Like, the way I look at the WASM and webGPU is they're just extensions of JavaScript. They're different languages, needless to say, and webGPU is especially esoteric. But I do think of them as add-ons to JavaScript. Some very good question from YouTube. I thought VRAM was the constraint. Great question. It depends on the model. So most, like a 4090 comes with 24 gigabytes of VRAM, and a Stable Diffusion model is a couple of gigabytes. Interestingly, we've had to hack around browser limits. So WASM is a 4 gigabyte array limit because it's a 32-bit system. So we've had to find ways to actually hack, the browser to accept larger models, like a 10 gigabyte model. There are very few models that are more than 20 gigabytes on ImageGen, if any. On the LLM side, there definitely are, but I also think this is where you quantize and do things like that. So it is a good question. I also think if you look at the Mac, it's actually remarkable, but the Mac is really giving NVIDIA a run for its money. Mac seems to be supported with webGPU almost better than NVIDIA, and that might be because Apple is on the web committee. But Apple can also like give you a sort of like arbitrary amount of sort of virtual VRAM, if that makes sense, VVRAM. So Apple works particularly well, and I'm really looking forward to the M4, which should be really really fast. So I think that's really exciting, and ultimately, I think that some of the best people I've talked to in this space have said that why send this stuff to a server, and the answer is, my initial answer was, oh no, you have to do it. That's the way everyone does it. And then after a few weeks, I sort of sat there and said, wait a second, why? Why can't we do this on the edge? And I think some use cases will require like super high powered servers that do things, kind of remotely because there's a huge amount of cost and it has to be done really quickly. You do take a performance hit with webGPU that I think is actually getting alleviated to the point where there will be no performance hit. Now, having said that, a 4090 is not an H100, but it's pretty close on the inference side, depending on optimizations. I think that the Apple chips are not NVIDIA chips, even though they've come a far way. So, you'll take a performance hit on any Apple device. If you're making images, you generally won't care or even see the difference. If you're doing audio, which is a big part of our company, I do think that there's going to be a performance hit, and certainly in some real-time audio, you don't want that performance hit. So I think it depends on the application. But again, I think if you take maybe the 20 to 50% of AI that's inference, and then you take the 20 to 50% of that could be addressed by your system, it's still a lot. And we're really excited about that. And I think the coolest thing here is that if you go to our site and you just click the earn button, you will earn crypto. And we have option for fiat as well, at least to pay in fiat as a subscriber. I think we're competitive with the other image generation services. In fact, we're one of the only ones that allows you to generate images without logging in. Most sites require you to log in, and then most of them require you to pay. We don't require either of those things, so I think that's pretty cool. And if you click the earn button, you can actually get paid. We're going to be ramping that up to the point where we hope people with GPUs can get a few $100 a month generating images. It obviously requires demand on the demand side. Now, creating demand obviously means us running the best image gen app we can, but and we're going to improve it and allow you to do in-painting and image editing, and we have a great demo that we haven't released yet where you can take any photo and then put yourself in it, and it'll sort of stylize you. And our pride of our company is sort of making these apps really easy to use and reducing bounce rate by making them super fast to load up, and you can just work right away as opposed to logging in or putting in your credit card or any of that stuff. And if you look at Google's never asked you to log in, they've never asked you to pay, they've never asked you to do anything. You can just Google search, and I think the rest of the web should be the same. So that's sort of how most of our apps work. But I think that on the earning side, one of the things we have to do is allow, so our site's called Shoggoth.ai. Let me just put it on the screen real quick. For some of you listening, you may not realize I'm streaming in a few places, so just bear with me. And we have a token that goes with, that kind of goes with our company. This is the token you earn when you serve. It's a Solana token. It's on Radium. The ticker is Shoggoth. The contract address is pinned in my Twitter/X profile. It starts with a 9. Don't accept imitation Shoggoth. So we're really excited about this because this is for the first time ever a system where webGPU is used to share GPU resources. Other people are trying to share GPU resources, but I think they're doing it the wrong way. Almost everyone in America has a GPU, but very, very few people know how to install programs and run command line programs. And a lot of people are scared of them. They don't want to download a bunch of weird stuff. And I think just going to a website is a lot easier, and you have to reduce that friction. Anytime you ask somebody to do something special, they generally 95% of people won't do it, and they'll move on. And I think that number compounds. So if you ask them to do 2 really weird things, you basically will get almost nobody to use your product, but the denominator of the web is 7 billion. So you'll find somebody to use it, even if you miss 295% bounces, you'll still have a small user group. But we want to make it really easy to earn money. So as soon as you go to shoggoth.ai and you press earn, your balance starts going up, which is, I think really great. But how do we create more and more opportunities for people to earn with their GPU? I think that we can create general systems that use your webGPU sort of portal to your GPU to do work. So I think we could do like a PyTorch on the web, sort of like Torch.js, and allow people to use an arbitrary amount of compute. There's obviously going to be a ton of people connected to Shoggoth at any given time, ready to do work and earn with their GPU. And I think that setting up large clusters and doing huge scale inference is really difficult. It's really difficult for us. And one of the problems is load. So during the day, you might have a lot of traffic, but during the night, you might not, because the clock turns, America goes to sleep, the rest of the world wakes up, and your traffic is maybe more optimized for the US than it is for Europe or Asia. And for us, we have all these GPUs that are idle at night. And it really would be nice if we could just pay for the GPUs we use. But that's not really the way it works. You might be able to do that with EC2 and some of the other cloud tools out there for regular compute, but you can't do it with GPU, unfortunately. The GPU market's just too tight. So if there is inference you could do across gaming GPUs, I think this is a really exciting thing to do. NVIDIA doesn't allow the cloud companies to use gaming GPUs. So in some ways, this is a way to use them without the big cloud providers like Azure or AWS, since they're not available on those sites. So I'm really excited about kind of taking this first step and this proof of concept, which works and has been tested very, very vigorously by us and our users and colleagues, our beta users. And, again, crossing this first milestone of being able to share your GPU right on the browser and earn crypto immediately is something that's never been done. And I think this is the start of something where that'll scale more and more, where anybody who wants to run a neural network may think about the first machine they think about is the machine they're on, but the next machine they may think about is our machines. Because if you think about AWS or the great people at Lambda, who we're a great customer of and great friends of, those are wonderful computers. They're very expensive, and they're not always available. On Shoggoth, the computers are very cheap, and they're always available. There are 20 million gaming GPUs that could do a lot of work, and the people that own them have already paid for them. When you buy a computer, you pay for a GPU. It's in your computer, and you basically don't earn anything from it until you throw your computer away. Why not earn 50, 100, 200 bucks a month with your computer? There's other companies that do this, like Salad, SALAD.com. Salad will pay you $200 or $300 a month for your GPU computer, which is awesome. But you do have to install a bunch of stuff. You have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Our product is a lot easier to use. The nice thing about Salad is it's very developer friendly. Our product is not developer friendly yet. We have to find ways to allow this to scale to millions of developers who could use it at their will. My dream is that you could press a button and launch 5,000 clients or 5 clients, depending on your scale. And there's no way to do that right now at all. Even if you're a big cloud client, you still have to do a lot of work to get sort of distributed data, pipelines, array, clusters, or Kubernetes. It's a real pain in the neck to try to get sort of all that stuff working together. So, using something like this could be a really solid sort of way to get that to work. So I'll take some questions if anybody's interested. We can talk about the tokenomics. We can talk about all kinds of different things about webGPU, but really excited about the this product and go ahead and give it a shot and make your the images that any image you want. And if you post it on X and I see it and like it, I'll send you $100 of Shoggoth or something like that, and we can have some fun here. Our image model is a little bit looser than some of the more stringent censorship versions of like Stability and Midjourney, so to let you make things more than some of those services will. But we still don't want you to go too crazy and make anything too objectionable. So we do stop certain things like pornography, but you'll find that we're a little more permissive than most of these. So anyway, that's kind of the thing. Mute, why don't you go ahead?
Hey Martin, we're mutuals on your Waggy account. So hello to you and everyone in the space. So I guess my question is, how other generative AI platforms, like for example Meta, for example ChatGPT's AI art generator, they don't do like evil scheisse, they don't do like, for example, Allah or like Hitler. Does your Shoggoth.ai, I know there's would it be able to do that?
Yeah, so I encourage you to just try it and see. I think that our goal is to walk that tightrope that's somewhere between too edgy and just edgy enough. I think that most of the guys out there try to avoid edgy like the plague, because they could get in a bad news article, they could get hauled in front of Congress, etc. We don't want to be on the total right end of that spectrum, but I do think we want to be to the right of the Midjourneys and the Stabilities. I tried to make something really simple on Stability the other day, and it denied me, and I was really ticked off. And they kind of go overboard. So I see the images folks are generating, and I definitely see that we're definitely to the right of what Stability and Midjourney will generate. But if you look hard enough and far enough, there are probably sites out there that are even more kind of aggressive. Our job isn't to be a porno company. We're not trying to be the number one kind of like edgiest place possible on the internet. I think that we want to loosen up a little bit, but and I think some of the other image gen companies kind of take themselves a little too seriously. But I don't think we want to help you make really wild, crazy images. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm watching a YouTube stream right now. I think you might have seen my comment or something. But it generated Hitler in a Jesus outfit, but not really that was my prompt. Hitler in a Jesus outfit, but the uniform is not a Jesus outfit. It's just him in a yarmulke. So
a yarmulke, okay.
Yeah, his mustache is full, so it's not really. It's
well,
Hitler-esque for sure.
Well, I think that there's a technique called in painting that we're going to allow sort of this ability to take your mouse and just like press or like paint kind of over the mustache, and it'll transform the mustache. So I think there's a lot of ways to kind of like do that. And the problem is a lot of these tools are available, but none of them are really in a solid central place. So like a couple of the image gen tools allow you to edit, a couple of them allow you to upscale, but nothing's got it in just one sort of centralized place, and we're going to try to do that. We have a lot of really cool examples with something called ControlNet. We're going to allow you to do fine tuning so that you can put your face in and your friends' faces in, as opposed to just celebrities and stuff like that. Obviously I might be in the model, but my brother isn't, and my brother looks different from me, and I'd love to make a image generation of me slam dunking a basketball on my brother, but the model doesn't know who my brother is because nobody really knows what he looks like. So I could just upload 5 or 10 photos, and this is something we're working on, and then the model will know, oh, okay, that's Martin's brother, say his name is John, and Martin dunking a basketball on John means what that means, and it'll actually generate that image. So I think there's so much to do with image gen that's not really been explored. And again, it's pretty low-end compute requirements, so why would we send this stuff to H100s or A100s? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And in fact, the company that created all of this, Stability AI, they're kind of basically teetering on bankruptcy and insolvency. I actually made an offer to buy the company because they have too many GPUs. So, and I don't blame them, actually. It wasn't a bad mistake they made. They didn't know exactly how many GPUs they would need. So they leased thousands of them. And they leased probably 2x too many, but maybe 3x or 4x. But regardless, like they kind of erred on the side of leasing more than less, which kind of makes sense. But now they're stuck in these huge leases and they basically are, it's causing the company to go bankrupt. So basically, I think that this problem is a problem that every AI company has. And our goal is to solve that problem, maybe more than it is to solve the image gen problem. There's a lot of good image gen apps out there. We want to make the best one, of course. But I think that the real win is when we can find ways to like let people who have neural networks come to us and say, I want to put this on your platform and use all the GPUs that you have on your platform to lower my bill or allow me to have that sort of daytime versus nighttime load. Or if I'm growing, I can add more GPUs, or if I need an extra supplement, I can go to your site. So I think this is the major problem. And you see NVIDIA's worth almost $3 trillion now. It's the second biggest company in the world, and that's because people want to buy these machines. And the problem with these machines is about half of them are sitting dormant right now. They're either unplugged or they're plugged in a data center and they're not being used. There's companies like Stability that have them that don't need to use them. There's companies like us that have them and wish they had more. And sometimes between training runs, we'll power them down, but we're still paying for them. So it's really frustrating because you might say, oh, we'll just keep using it. Well, we have to go adjust our code and adjust our data sets and then restart the training again. So in that time frame, it could be a week or two where our GPU is just sitting there. And it would be really nice to share it, but there's no easy way to do that either. So I think if you actually looked at all the GPUs available in the world, you can use those right now. They cover the amount of demand times like 10. But because of the dislocation of where the GPUs are and whether or not they can be shared because of software reasons, there is a shortage of GPUs, even though paradoxically we have more than we need. So it's kind of like water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. There's chips everywhere, but not a drop of compute to have. So it's a really ironic situation that could be solved by software. And that's kind of our approach here. It's very difficult. WebGPU is astonishingly hard. It's its own language called webGPU shader language, so WGSL. And WGSL is its own brand new language. So it's a computer programming language that looks a little like Rust, but it's its own language that does its own things. So you have to learn a whole new language to work with it. Very few people know it. And then you have to sort of transpile and work with other sort of harnesses, whether it's Onyx or something called Apache TVM. So there's a whole lot of stuff you need to do to engineer this, but we were able to sort of put it all together. My X has this like bug where I have this like stupid really stupid thing on X. It sucks. I have a time limit. And the time limit keeps me sometimes from streaming. Okay. Sorry about that. Can you guys still hear me? Sorry. So yeah, I have a little bug on my phone. So what was I saying? The webGPU shader language is rather difficult to work with, but I do think that people like Zenova at Hugging Face and a few other people, quite a number of Hugging Face people, quite a number of Google people, and a number of Microsoft people, but really a total number of people that's probably, quite frankly, less than 1,000 people who really work with webGPU every day and know it really well. You have to change everything from sort of Python to JavaScript, which isn't that big of a change in my opinion. And most of these neural networks are not gigantic amounts of code. They're gigantic models, but the code is really usually 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 lines of Python. Now, a lot of that Python relies on other libraries, but thankfully we do have transformers.js and we do have diffusers.js. So there are ways to sort of use some of the existing workloads and libraries that exist out there in JavaScript land. So I think for the developer, when we get sort of an ability to rent out this cloud, for lack of a better term, to other developers, other than just our own company that's running this image gen model on it, I think it's going to be really exciting for both people who can earn as well as people who can rent. Right now, this launch is sort of a proof of concept where, we made this work, and it was a lot of work, but it was really enjoyable to sort of connect all these systems and watch them work. But we're going to add more complex neural networks. There's definitely a whole lot going on in images, but also possibly audio and LLMs. And that way, like I said, you might be able to, certainly as a GPU owner, earn something with your GPU, but also as a potential enterprise, you can rent GPUs one time or at scale, or throttle up or throttle down depending on your own needs.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. GPUs are freaking grand programming unit. But I'm totally bearish on Adobe Photoshop, the generative expand feature. It's absolutely terrible. But yeah, Shoggoth, pretty bullish on it, mate. Keep it going. I think there's so much potential with it. And I mean, it already created Hitler, and thank God the space is unrecorded, but Hitler in a Jesus outfit. I want to see it produce some god-like images. Would love to see that when I get back home. So yeah, we'll be using it. How much is it to pay for more credits or something? I wasn't able to check
Yeah,
that out yet.
it's only $3. So if you pay $3, you get I think it's 100 images. And like I said, if you click the earn button, you'll actually earn crypto. And our hope is that we can get you earning hopefully over $100 or $200 a month for your GPU. There'll be a lot of tweaking that has to happen there, but webGPU is a really exciting young technology that, as our GPUs get more powerful, especially with Apple's silicon, I think that we're going to be able to do all the inference we need on the edge, and quite frankly, the speed requirement of not having to go to a server, which depending on where you are in the world, because GPUs don't move with you, it's hard to have a GPU CDN. It could be 100 milliseconds to get that to work. So I think the edge is where all this is going to happen. Obviously, our cell phones are still a little too weak to do neural networks, but I think even that's happening, where Apple's putting neural networks or neural cores in their phone processors, and we're going to see that more and more. Obviously, Google is as well. So I think that we're really excited about that. And the crypto we launched is also, I think, pretty exciting. This is a Solana token. Solana is, I think, one of the best blockchains that exists. There's a lot of people trying to cash in on the GPU kind of like craze, and I think a lot of people are doing it kind of the wrong way. We think that most of these sort of tools lack sort of ease of use. So people who rent out their GPUs need a really easy way to do it, and there's nothing easier than going to a website and pressing a button. But I think on the developer side as well, my experience with all of these apps has been terrible. It's been really hard to use any GPU in general, sort of sharing tools. Everyone sort of has a flaw. And then a lot of these companies are looking for gigantic market caps, like several billion, for brand new projects, which is really kind of distressing to me. So we were able to launch this system that works day one. It's not a promise, it works right now. And, can also both provide earnings for people sharing GPUs, but also for us. So, I'm excited. I do think the edginess is important. I just got a request for crack addict smoking a crack pipe, HD, which is high def, wrinkles on face. Again, not my cup of tea, but I do think that there are people who want to make images that Hugging Face, Midjourney, and Stability won't make for you. And that's an image that may offend somebody. It may not be cool, but it's not something that is illegal or dangerous. And I think if somebody wants to make those kinds of images, they should be allowed to. And it's not sort of Stability or Midjourney's place to say, no, you can't do that. So I think that there's a huge market for that. Again, we don't want to be making tons of deep fakes. We don't want to be making pornography. I think there are going to be some guardrails, but I think that the sort of having fun, like what Elon says, having fun has kind of been made illegal on so much social media. You can't tell jokes anymore. You can't do anything even remotely edgy. So we do want to be a little bit more accessible. And again, we're sort of free to try. We give you 50 free photos right away, which is much more than anybody else does. So I'm really pumped about our project. Anybody else have a question? Let me see if I have one on YouTube. I think I do. Who validates the earnings? Great question. So this is the other problem with GPUs and AI and the blockchain. And this really just doesn't work. There are huge problems with something called verifiable computing. There are potential solutions down the road, like zero knowledge proofs, but they're really far down the road. They're not even close to kind of ready to verify compute. So the idea here is that you could fake the compute. So if you were motivated enough, you could sit there and spoof different messages. We have all kinds of techniques to stop you from doing that. But if you tried hard enough, you could send fake tensors, you could do all this stuff, and you could say, pay me my crypto because I'm, making these images and you owe me money. And you might think you could get away with it, but this is a centralized system. So we decide who gets paid when, we can ban you, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the blockchain ethos of wanting to be decentralized is great. I'm a big fan of crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin and so forth, but you just can't do everything with this. I think that if you wanted to try to get decentralized AI, it's just never going to work. Too many breakthroughs will have to happen, maybe 10 years from now, something like that. But right now, there's just no real ability for this stuff to get done on a scale sort of world where you avoid the double spend problem or the sort of a verifiable compute problem. So you can check that the users have submitted the right work by doing the work again, which kind of neutralizes the whole point of the cost and the decentralization and the speed. So you could try to do that. And even that's not foolproof because there's tons of ways to get around that too. So I think the answer here is a centralized system that allows you to sort of share resources, but not necessarily need to do something that's really decentralized or really kind of like, protected against some of these important issues for other things like money. They're not so important when it comes to something like sharing a GPU. You don't need that much sort of hardness versus a system in this case. And generally, you should be able to trust a centralized system to pay you and so forth. Otherwise, that system will sort of lose trust, it'll lose your trust, et cetera. It's not so much at stake versus something like Bitcoin where you do need that like immutable trust. So that's kind of the reason for sort of choosing a centralized approach. I think all of the guys that are trying to do AI in a decentralized way, like BitTensor and others, are kind of doomed. I've already kind of criticized BitTensor quite a bit. If you look at some of their code, I pointed out some of their weaknesses and some of the sort of shortfalls they have in the past. And I feel like, there's sort of a lot to be desired there. So we did create a token called Shoggoth. It's a Solana token. When you click earn to share your GPU, you get paid in that token. So a really cool system in my opinion. And that's really that. Any other questions? Have some comments, thoughts on Monero that's sort of out of scope here. Will this format be rolled out to neats? I do think we were trying to get audio done on webGPU. It's a pretty complicated neural network. So our audio system is both a transformer-based and diffusion-based model. So it sort of uses both. In fact, there are more models than just that. So nobody's ever done a text-to-speech system on webGPU, but I do think it's possible. And we are also hoping to maybe release a desktop app as much as it is more complicated and difficult to actually get to work. I do think that, it would be nice to have a system that worked that way as well. Okay, I think my YouTube's getting like DDoSed or something. It's really funny.
Jesus Christ, Martin, good luck with that. Nervous laughter.
Yeah, I think that, you get a botnet and you can just spam comments and, Yeah, so Dex Screener doesn't show Shoggoth, but Dex Tools does. So Shoggoth is a SPL22 token. So I thought that this would be an advantage. Turns out that it is not an advantage, that the original Solana token is what you want. But we made ours on SPL22, which kind of allows you to do a bunch of stuff. So you have to go find it on Dex Tools and Radium. Cool. Any other questions or comments? How about copyright laws on these images? Good question. That's something that nobody's really figured out yet. The law is not clear on this. Um, all these diffusion models were trained on lots of images. Whether those images were copyrighted or not is unknown. And then whether or not you can use the output of the diffusion model is also unknown. I think if you think about LLMs as the broad use case here, the LLMs were trained on the whole internet. So it's really hard to avoid copyright there. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see what the law sort of says on this. It doesn't seem to me that, any of this stuff is problematic in terms of copyright, but, one never knows, obviously. Most of the people in these models are public figures, and most of the models are pretty nondescript, so they don't really violate copyright, so to speak. But if there are copyrighted photos in there, I think some of the companies have tried hard to make sure that they sort of steer away from copyrighted images, and some of them don't care. So I think it depends. AI is a new field. It's a lot of crazy stuff is happening, and we'll kind of see if copyright law ends up kind of coming to pass. Any other questions? Yeah, I think Europe's sort of the backwards country, right? Like or territory. They're trying to clamp down on everything, GPDR stuff and AI stuff. They're trying to shut down technology in general.
Hey, yeah, a quick question. First of all, really cool hearing about everything. And what drove you toward a specific use case for generation rather than maybe making like a microservice AI-oriented thing where maybe someone's doing object detection, someone else is doing edge detection, and this kind of ensemble to some bigger thing? What made you focus so hard on the generation part, or is that just the best use case for testing sort of the downstream web GL stuff?
Yeah, well, webGPU is the successor basically to WebGL. Sounds like you remember WebGL. It's still used, obviously, but webGPU and WebGL are, I want to say they're not backwards compatible, honestly. But anyway, I do think that the holy grail for us is to have like an IDE where developers could write their code and then just say like execute the code, send that to a function maybe, and one parameter could be like, the number of GPUs or systems you want to send it to. Inference is a little weird, obviously. So we just have to sort of think about how to handle that. So do you want these GPUs loaded with these models and waiting? And do you pay for that whether or not they get used, or do you pay for that on inference? There's a bunch of ways to think about this. I thought we'd start it by just being our own client for now, and then eventually start expanding it to third-party clients or also just more of our own models. So I think that this is mostly a proof of concept. I don't think this is necessarily something that will either scale or sort of work immediately for other things. Having said that, I mean, if you had Stability's popularity, obviously that would scale. So, and again, we tried our hardest to make sure that our site is really easy to use, no paywalls, no auth walls, just go ahead and use it. So I do think we'll get, millions of users, but I think that at the same time, we have a very sort of finite sort of sharing system here. It works on one model. We're going to have to adapt that to several other models. We do want to host things like LoRa's and stuff like that. But I get your point that, the more general you could make this, the better it is for developers out there. But for us, it was about, walking before running. We wanted to make sure that, we began with the sort of something that worked and wasn't sort of vaporware or promise of something that might work down the road. There's a lot of companies doing that. And I think it was better to start with one thing that worked really well and ship it, and then try to ship the next thing, in a few weeks or a few months or whatever it is, and just keep sort of growing and expanding that way. Does that help at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Somebody asked, would you charge anyone to create content? I think it's a really good idea in terms of if somebody wants to make a fine tuning. So right now there's a company called Civit AI, which has become really, really popular. And Civit hosts these LoRa's, and these creators spend a lot of time fine tuning these models, and they want to get paid for them because they're putting all this work into fine tuning, and they're making like very specific fine tunes, like animal fine tunes or anime fine tunes or certain TV shows or whatever. There's even a LoRa for me on Civit AI, I believe, and for different like sort of B-list, C-list celebrities, and they're really cool. But if you take the time to do it, you kind of have this intellectual property that's sort of your asset as a content creator, and I think you should be willing to share that and get paid on that. So I think there's a sort of exciting way to do that. You do get paid in Shoggoth tokens. We are going to expand it so that you can get paid in fiat, you can get paid in Solana, you can get paid in ETH, etc. So for now, we just have the withdrawal as our token. You can become a subscriber with fiat, which I think is really important. A lot of these crypto projects forget that fiat is still what 99.9% of the world uses. Not many people want to use crypto, quite frankly. When you get paid, getting paid in crypto is I think a lot more acceptable because people can kind of quickly convert that to fiat, whereas getting fiat to go to crypto can often be pretty tricky. You kind of need all these accounts and all this stuff, but it's a lot easier to sort of use crypto and get stuff paid for with that. So we like the way we're set up on that. I mean, we will add more and more sort of things there. Good question from the chat. Will there be a rug pull? No. I try to avoid rug pulls. They are a great way to go to jail. Although I have to shout out Sahil, who got Caitlyn Jenner pretty good. Sahil is a beast. That was really impressive. Caitlyn Jenner did not know what was going on, and really sad day for Caitlyn and Caitlyn's fans and followers. That was a nasty rug, and I think Sahil is not done. He's going to keep scamming these celebs until they're out. But no, our company is a software company that doesn't just do crypto. So I think a lot of the folks in crypto, one of the problems they have is that if they're stuck on crypto, they end up kind of having this problem where if their token price goes down or something like that, they get demotivated and they kind of quit and go to another project. We have tons of products and financing, and we're doing really well on some of our products, like our financial product, and we don't really need to make our token go up like a bunch of these other kind of companies, like maybe Ionet. We're not dependent on one token generation event and making sure that one's really pumped up and all that stuff. Like, I just don't need, to do that. So I think that we're a lot more reliable and stable than some of these other outfits that are really desperate. Their VCs are pressuring them to make the token go up, pump it, do whatever you can. We kind of don't care. Our job is to make great software. The prices, the users, they'll all speak for themselves. If we do a really good job, our token price maybe will go up over time. If we do a really bad job, it won't. But we're not going to be out there pumping it and buying bots and fake followers and all kinds of stuff like that. I think it's just kind of disgusting. And one of the reasons we made this is because we actually did want to make a sophisticated piece of software that worked. And if you know anything about this world, trying to get a PyTorch model to load on your web browser and run in webGPU is not something that's for the faint of heart. And to continue to adapt webGPU further and further for more advanced neural network techniques, even like different optimizers, I guess that's more in training, but things like different time step generators and denoisers and stuff like that in diffusion models, these are not easy to necessarily make work as you're translating from Python to JavaScript. And especially with WebGPU shader language, which has its own idiosyncrasies. So we've had to do a lot, and there is no like web WGSL community to talk to. Like, you're on your own. We asked Google, who created WebGPU and WGSL, for help sometimes, and they tell us that nobody knows the answer to some of these questions. So it really isn't like JavaScript or Python or even something like Torch or Pandas, where there's huge communities around these things, and everyone can answer these questions. WebGPU can't help you. I'm sorry, ChatGPT can't help you with WebGPU, and all these other kind of difficulties we've had to muscle through. And particularly the biggest one is getting a model size that's more than 4 gigabytes loaded in to memory, which is very, very difficult given the constraints around WASM and WebGPU. But we're able to do that. And I think that, again, we could solve some problems for some people out there. And I think that's really important. I think in crypto, there's a lot of people trying to create crypto that doesn't solve problems. Again, with IONET and things like that, there just doesn't need to be a token, really. Yeah, mute.
Sorry, I didn't realize I misclicked, but yeah, I'm a huge fan in the comments down below. Andre, shout out to him. I don't know if you read his comment yet. Geez, I had a few questions. I'm losing my mind right now.
There is somebody asking, I assume you've seen Zenova's 5.3 WebGPU demo. Yeah, so I think that the small WebGPU demos are pretty easy to do. I think once you get into models that are more than a few gigabytes, they end up being pretty hard. So, I think Zenova does amazing work, but I do think that the Google side has to do a lot more. WASM 64 is still not out yet. WASM 64 has sort of been in development for a really long time. We need the 64-bit word to get bigger models into WebGPU without the tricks that we do. But I would say if Zenova could do a model as big as ours, then I'd be impressed. Sort of throwing down the gauntlet there. But no, Zenova is a brilliant programmer that does a really, really great job, and somebody that we would love to work with, quite frankly. And I talked to a lot of his colleagues over there at Hugging Face. I do think that this community of JavaScript neural network people is going to grow. And again, there's not going to be much need. Imagine being an AI developer and having to rent a bunch of GPUs when the user's compute can do it. Why should I go spend a fortune with AWS, with Lambda, with these other guys when I can just go ahead and have the user use their computer? Bring your own compute is the way we think about it, BYOC. And I think that trend's going to increase, especially for some of these relatively mundane tasks. Imagine a classifier. Why would a classifier why would that need to be done on a third-party compute? So as you go from the low-end machine learning all the way up to the extremely high-end, maybe a mixture of experts or something like that, the lower end can be done on the user's hardware. And I think somewhere in the middle that sort of separates, and you have to go do it on an H100 and A100. But for some of the lower end stuff, including image gen, which has now become somewhat low end, we're really reaching the limit of image gen. If you think about it, the stuff we're seeing out of SD3 and Midjourney, I don't know that you get a lot better than that. I think we will get incremental improvements, but the low-hanging fruit is kind of done. I mean, we've gotten what we needed. If anything, like Mute said a second ago, some of the stuff we're missing from image gen is actually just kind of the edginess being allowed. And if you're a really good crack programmer, you can definitely figure out how to evade the Midjourney and evade the sort of stable diffusion guardrails. But 99% of the rest of us don't know how to do that. And on our website, we loosened it a little bit. We're not going to get it perfect. I mean, there's definitely some things that it's generating that we don't like, and there's some things it's stopping generating that we don't want it to stop. But I think that, if you want to generate, for example, one of the things that Midjourney will ban you from generating is Donald Trump boxing Joe Biden. That really is an innocuous kind of image, right? Why is that offensive? It's according to Midjourney, violent. And I understand they have a business that they have to operate, and it's better to play it safe than sorry. But for us, I think that we're going to try to err a little bit more on the side of less censorship and more sort of freedom. Having said that, like I said, we don't want to generate gore. We don't want to generate, God forbid, CP or CSAM, which we're very, very vigilant about. And there's other things that are just generally obscene that we kind of don't want to generate. But I do think that you should be able to sort of create at your will. And I do think that, content creators should be able to share on our system. So webGPU is exciting. I mean, it really saddens me when I think about 20 million NVIDIA GPUs that are not being used right now. So think about your GPU at home, if you're not at home. And if you are, think about your GPU that's in front of you. Probably at least 50%, and I would say more likely 90% of the time, your GPU is not being used. Why? Because you don't play Fortnite all day. You don't play League of Legends all day. Even if you do, you go to sleep, you go to work, you go to school, and your GPU is not being used, say, for 12 hours a day. So at the end of the day, you will sort of, give me just 1 second. I want to send a message to a colleague. At the end of the day, your GPU could be used, it could be shared, and it's just sitting there collecting dust.
You're muted again, Martin.
I'm muted?
Or maybe you paused? I don't know.
Yeah, I've been pausing erratically because I'm trying to send a message to my colleague who is not doing what I asked him to do. So, yeah, in essence, I think that, I think about those 20 million GPUs and think about them just sitting there dormant. And then everyone's saying, oh, we need more GPUs. There's a GPU shortage. And it's like, look, those GPUs do matmul's the same way that the quote-unquote shortage GPUs do matmul's. So it really is not, it's kind of silly to think about this great shortage and that NVIDIA's, riding their way to 3 trillion saying that there's this big shortage when there isn't a shortage. Most of these GPUs are off. My GPU at home is very capable. It is off. It's been off. It's not being used. My computer's on, but the GPU is basically powered down. It powers itself down if it's not doing anything. It's got very little, sort of voltage running through it, and it's got no utilization. And it could be used by any of these AI companies and other sort of entities that want to borrow this and use it. And I think that it's not going to work in every situation. I do think federated learning is coming a long way, and we should be able to do federated learning in a way that's, kind of exciting soon. But federated learning still has some ways to go, and even verifiable compute is really far away. So that's why we're picking sort of a centralized standpoint. I think that we want to be centralized probably for years to come. I don't see anybody truly being able to reliably deliver verified compute in a cheap or fast way for many years. I think the idea of zero knowledge proofs are fantastic for really small proofs. They're not so great for any other proofs. If you've ever seen these work, it can be a 4-hour process to prove that you did one 10-second inference, which is really which is really kind of an interesting way to look at it. So I feel like, zero knowledge is kind of dead in the water for a while until we find really great ways to make these arithmetic circuits and whatnot. So I think just centralized is fine. And when you rent a computer from AWS or Lambda, you don't worry that the computer is not going to do the thing you asked it to do. So I think that the same thing should apply here. And again, certain mission critical things, you may not want to rent a crowdsourced GPU. But if it's something where you have 98% reliability or 99, it's something you may be willing to make that trade-off. And spoofing GPU results is pretty difficult. We have a bunch of guardrails in there to stop that. But if you're really motivated, it is certainly possible to try to do it. And then we can sort of stop your payout and stuff like that, which is what helps on the centralized side. Mute, you were to say something else?
Yeah. So Shoggoth, your coin is on Sol?
Yes.
Okay, it's already on there, on Dex Trader?
Yes, it's on Dex Tools, I think.
Okay, and then my second question was, so art, I guess behind the philosophy behind art, it's art, so it's like peaceful, right? Art kind of maintains peace, or it kind of brings the war down. So like, what was I saying? So why can't we create violent images and depict violence in images? What is exactly the problem with that? I mean, we see violent images on Twitter all the time. If you're on the news Twitter, I'm in crypto Twitter, so I don't really see any of that. But Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't mind violence that much. I think that you're not wrong in what you're saying. I think that there's going to be some people that could find that really offensive. For example, if you recall, there was a comedian, what's her name, Kathy Griffin? And
Yeah.
she made a violent sort of piece of art about Donald Trump. And that was something that a lot of people were kind of not happy about. And I do think art, in a lot of ways, is supposed to sort of shock. And for any art to be interesting, it kind of has to be transgressive in a lot of ways. Um, but having said that, you know, as a company, you always have to ask yourself, is this something that we want to be seen as purveying and helping people create some potentially grotesque image? Because if we want, like, Picasso's Guernica is something that makes a lot of sense. But if you want something like, an image of a terrible thing and it's not so much art, whereas you're trying to make it to gross somebody out or piss somebody off, I think that's a very different thing. So it's really hard to arbitrate between those things. And I think image gen in a lot of ways is really made for people to like do fairly low end things. Like instead of hiring a graphics artist, they can kind of make an ad or something like that themselves with this tool for 3 cents instead of, I need an ad or an image for my website and I don't know where to look and it's really complicated and I can't quite get it right. So I'm going to try this tool. And after like 3 or 4 generations, I got the perfect thing. And I even have a friend in Hollywood, believe this or not, who's a feature film guy, and he sometimes uses Midjourney as a tool for some of his like editing, not for production, but just sort of for rough editing. And then he replaces it later with more professional, perfected CGI. So there's a lot of use cases here that are not just sort of about edginess or art. Obviously, there are people that want to look at anime or hentai or stuff like that, and everyone's different. Some people want to generate the latest political thing, some people want to play a joke on their friend, and we're going to try to make tools for all of those things. So we really like the space. As I mentioned, we have sort of tried to buy Stability itself, which seems to be rapidly sort of disappearing or going bankrupt, but we are really excited about this space sort of in general. So that's sort of our commitment to this. We're in this for years to come. We don't really care about today's token price or tomorrow's token price because we're going to still be here in 5 years. And if you look at Akash, they started with a 15 or 20 million market cap, and they got up to $1 billion today. And I think you're going to see a lot of like AI, GPU, crypto wannabes start at 2 billion and then end up at 15 million 2 or 3 years from now. We'd much rather be the former than the latter. So we love making software. We love, developing tools. I love for people to be able to monetize their GPUs in a really easy to use way. I don't really care if they do that via fiat or they do that via crypto. In a lot of ways, fiat's a lot better. In other ways, crypto's better. So it really depends on what you want. We don't judge you for saying I'm just a fiat person, or we don't judge you for saying I'm just a crypto person. So I think that crypto in a lot of ways is the smallest part of this, and we're just trying to make a cool image gen platform where people can get paid. It's interesting because to pay people, it's actually really hard to do with fiat. If you've ever signed up as a YouTube sort of content creator, you go through all these hoops to get paid, and it's really painful. Even X, who's done a really amazing job of making it relatively easy, it's still not that easy. Crypto is like two clicks and you have your money. So I think that's really, really neat and a much better payment rails than trying to get it to work for fiat, where we have to potentially do KYC and make sure that all these pipes are connected. It's real pain in the ass. So I'm excited about the crypto part of this, but it's also not like the be all end all where we have to force fit crypto to work for our narrative because we have VCs that need a token to go up or something like that. It's really not our interest. And we've thought about how to use crypto for 2 years, like legitimately and intellectually. And we generally didn't find a way to do that. It was really hard. There was no really obvious kind of way to do it. But I think that this makes sense because if you think about crypto is something that doesn't cost us anything to create. It takes us 1 second to create a token. But the fact that people are willing to trade their GPU for crypto is really cool because it didn't cost us anything to make, and they're providing something that does cost a lot of fiat to make. So we're able to transact in a way that doesn't cost us capital in a traditional sense or in any sense, and get a real world asset in exchange for something that's typically actually very expensive to get. And in fact, if you look at NVIDIA's chart, it's extremely expensive to get right now, is this access to this compute. Now, there's still a lot of barriers. WebGPU is very, very hard to use. As I said, it's very hard to connect. It will be a bear to get a lot of other developers onto this, but at the very least, we can satisfy our own compute needs here. Right now, we're fielding what looks to be a very popular image gen service. Our servers are going off the out of control right now. We're fielding some of that using crowdsourced GPU at the edge. So I'm really excited about that feature of this, where more and more GPU bills across the world will go down as we push to the edge, and we can help connect that. So that's our vision. That's a huge market. That's a multi-trillion-dollar market. So we're really excited about playing a really small role in that, but we can grow that role over time as well. Alloy?
Yeah, so you were talking about the moderation side, and sort of you're saying centralized versus decentralized, and where sort of the line gets blurred versus where centralized becomes really necessary, and I think that's smart. And when it comes to both the scaling and the evolving narrative around what is edgy and what's not, I think the Kathy Griffin example is actually really good. And so for something like that, do you foresee the GPU that people are contributing as moderation services themselves, or will you centralize those moderation services? The reason I ask is because the scaling thing for generation, obviously everyone's afraid of that, or they have idle GPUs, whichever face of the problem you're on. But there's the other side of it, is you want to moderate all of that content, you might need to scale 1-to-1, right? For every node you have generating, you might need to have a node that's also moderating what could be potentially generated. So how are you solving that problem? Or are you moderating everything centrally with a couple H100s?
Yeah, so you can moderate with a number of different tools. For example, LLMs can moderate. There's nothing that stops. OpenAI actually has a free endpoint that determines how racist, homophobic, or sexist something is. So it's very specific. It gives you a value for each of those things. So we use the OpenAI tool a little bit. We also have some banned words. Obviously, there's just some words that we don't want users trying to do. So we use a little bit of both, and I don't think we have to scale linearly with sort of demand. We definitely have humans in the loop. Our developers, even myself, we have access to an admin portal, and we sort of glance over it, make sure there's nothing too crazy going on. But I think that if you try to make some really wild image, we're going to catch it. There are already now, if you type in, topless woman, it'll stop you from doing that. If you're really creative and use your brain, you might be able to figure out a way around it. And I personally don't think nudity is something that's really terrible. I do think pornography is probably where we draw the line. We don't want somebody generating pornography, but I do think nudity is sort of pretty okay. At the end of the day, you can find it, on the internet. It's not that hard. And these aren't real people, so it's a lot less obscene and offensive, given that they're fictitious people generated by a mathematical algorithm. So it's not something like that. But we don't really want you to generate a nude of somebody or something like that. And obviously you may be able to do that with our system in terms of celebrities. Would really rather you not do that with some other kind of LoRa or in painting, and that's not possible at the moment. But eventually, at some point when we do add in painting and stuff like that, we're going to make sure that you will not be able to do something like that, because if you could, there are probably laws against it. There probably should be some laws against it with revenge porn and whatnot. There already are a number of high schools where there's a lot of tears and a lot of really mad people because you could take any photo from an Instagram and potentially make something offensive, and that's not something we want to contribute to. I think that's something we want to help stop. So I think when we make those kinds of tools that are even more powerful, we have to be a little bit more sensitive. And I also respect what Mute said, that ultimately, there has to be some um, ability for people to make art and for them to be free. And certainly, if you're a good enough programmer, you can probably do this stuff anyway on your own. But again, I don't see a need for us to help it, and it's not money that we want. If somebody wants to make money off of that, let them do that. But we're not going to do that. We want to help people who want to make, like I said, advertisements, splash pages, jokes for their friends. Simple things like that. A little bit edgy, sure, but too edgy, definitely not. And we're still really excited about the system in general. WebGPU, like I said, it's something that's never been done in terms of sharing GPU resources across a cluster or a swarm, as we call it, and having a batch sort of system that brokers out the jobs, sends them to different systems, and it's all working seamlessly. I'm surprised that it's still up. Usually, when we launch a product, we get a lot of demand and something breaks, and I have to shout out our team, Bryn and Fat Cat, Patricio, definitely Big Jason, the boss, and Austin and all the other guys at our office, doing a marvelous job, doing amazing software here. Sometimes we hit it out of the park, sometimes we don't. For Dr. Gupta, we haven't had 1 second of downtime in over a year of launch and over 400,000 users. So that was an incredible achievement. I can't say the same for every single app we've put out, but I'm really happy that we make quality software. And, this is the start, not the end. Shoggoth will be around for a long time. And my dream is that, like I said, we have a PyTorch IDE that you can write Python code in, and it will seamlessly run on your web GPU. Behind the scenes, what's going to happen is a lot of translation and transpilation and ugly stuff. But I don't see why we couldn't replicate most of what's happening in PyTorch, at least the elemental stuff. I don't think it's a huge library, so I don't think we replicate everything. But I don't see why, for example, Transformers.js replicates a lot of the transformer, diffusers replicates a lot of diffusion models. There are a couple of things left in the middle, but I do think you could sort of move that whole Python ecosystem to JavaScript, which is a big and ambitious thing to say. But you see people like Yassine and myself as well been sort of shitting on Python for it not being a great language. And again, it's even more absurd when you think about this gigantic supply of GPUs that exists outside of the server room. NVIDIA has an end-user license agreement that says you can't put these GPUs in a server room, but they don't say anything about sharing them from your home. And that's what we're sort of enabling. And nothing's going to take down NVIDIA, but I think if we can help people save money or at least rationalize some of their GPU spend, including our own company, but ideally hundreds of companies that are doing the same thing, that are making their own image gen, that are making their own audio gen, that are doing whatever, that we'd love to have those people help us.
Yeah.
My mic's messed up.
Can you hear me, or is your mic?
It's a little better.
I had a couple questions. At what point do you think generative AI art, like platforms, would be their epitome, and what would that look like? And then also, what? This is kind of a little derailing, but like Web 4, what do you think Web 4 would be like? But the first question more important, yeah.
I don't know about Web 4. I don't even know what that is. I think that Web 3 is an important step forward. When we tried to use stuff like Phantom and other things, we enjoyed it. I mean, it was definitely a cool new auth system. It's definitely not, the same as Google Auth, and it always is a little unnerving to have to use these monolithic companies to do your work with, and you worry about getting canceled or getting banned or whatever. You see all these horror stories about Stripe, where Stripe will just decide that, there's no, like I saw somebody get canceled on Stripe the other day because they had too many cancellations or too many refunds. It was really sad because it's like, they're just a huge company, and they're just like, oh, we don't need this guy's business, we don't need that guy's business. They're sort of becoming Chase, basically. And the nice thing about Web3 is it's permissionless, and it's sort of a joy to work with in some ways. It's still a little underdeveloped in other ways. Like, it's not that easy to use all those systems, and they're very disparate. So like, if Solana's exciting today, but Ethereum's exciting tomorrow, then what do you do? Or vice versa, obviously, is what's been the case. So I think it's, there's some benefits to that. So when you say Web4, I'm not sure what you mean. When you talk about generative AI in general, I think there's a reason that Meta is invested in Torch and in, sort of open source generative AI. And I think it's actually what a lot of people don't know, or maybe you won't agree with me, is that what Meta is really trying to do is to make the social experience more exciting. And so when I described sort of doing fine tunes for you and your friends, that's kind of what we're going to see, where you can, and I think if you notice, like Snapchat did a little bit of this with the Bitmojis, but like if I want to show myself, like I mentioned earlier, slam dunking a basketball on John, and it's a Python basketball or something, I can do that with a really cool image gen, but I can't do that because they don't know who John is. And I can almost do like a RAG image model or just a fine tuning, and then it would make a perfect image of me playing basketball with Dustin, who has a big lambda on his t-shirt because he's the lambda calculus guy, or something like that. And so the point is, like, Meta's sort of going to that place where we can create maybe even our own videos, where you can say, you know what, I want to post on Instagram today, but I want to post a video of me hitting a baseball, out of the Yankee Stadium. And that's hard to do because I don't know how to hit a baseball at a Yankee Stadium. I can barely hit it to first base. But it'd be cool if you can generate that generative AI video for me, and all my followers would see it and say, wow, that's cool. And I think we're going to get to that place where Meta puts out a model like that, and it runs on PyTorch, which is their system, and it even may run on their chip, which they've made. So I think that's kind of the future we're getting to, and that's why these social media companies, especially Meta, but also ByteDance, have invested really hard in AI. I think that's what is kind of coming around the corner.
Yeah, social media definitely makes it more accessible to everybody, because most people are on social media, and it kind of, no offense, but it kind of dumbs it down for everybody, and it makes it more accessible. Anyway, hi, John.
Well, I could make content that I couldn't make in real life. I think that's the cool thing. If I wanted to, have a picture of me and Kim Kardashian, it's something that'd be really hard for me to do in real life, but it could be something I could do and make a joke out of it or something like that with these models, which I think could make just the content creation abilities can kind of all of a sudden become like, the sky becomes the limit. John might have been upset about what I said.
Yeah, how dare you?
Well, you could be slam dunking a basketball on me, and I have a JavaScript logo on my jersey.
Well, we don't need AI generation for that. We can make that up.
I forgot how tall and strong you are.
Yeah, the tallest and the strongest. Well, congrats on the launch, man.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun working with this alien language webGPU. It's just this bizarre corner of like WASM. I don't know how much you've done with WASM, if ever.
Basically nothing.
Oh, okay. I thought you might have. I know you're a good web dev.
We used to do our initial LLM prototyping on in JavaScript, but
that's wild.
We've since moved to C.
Oh, that's great. So no Python.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a big front end though.
Well, it's funny to see Karpathy do his sort of GPT-2 in C. I hope that we see GPT-3 in C too, or other kind of like LLMs. But we saw the Grok model in JAX, which was kind of a funny thing, because JAX is probably the least popular of all these. But
I'd like to see Llama 2 or Llama 3, same architecture anyways. But if you could do like a full training from scratch, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I think that these companies have been loath to put out their data sets and loath to put out their training scripts, but I think Karpathy's demystifying that a little bit, and we're going to see more and more, um, more and more of that sort of become available. At least these techniques, as years go by, the techniques will start to like slip, and people put them in papers, and people talk amongst each other, and we'll get a sense for like, okay, how many images do you need to make a really good image model? So I really like the fact that like there's always going to be this cutting edge, but there will be an accessible middle ground for the rest of us. Um, so yeah, it's a really cool space. It's pretty different from the stuff you're doing, I think. But um, is your are your like AI techniques? Do you think they'd be amenable to the edge, or do you think they have to stay on the server?
Right now, we've been pretty heavily invested in the server because we want to be able to take advantage of scaling up a lot on a per request basis. But I think in the long run, we'd probably want to do some edge models because there's a lot of what we're doing that could totally run on consumer devices. It's just that the models aren't smart enough at a low enough scale yet. But I think maybe in a year or two, we'd be interested in doing something on the edge.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, a lot of enterprise computers are fairly powerful, and
Yeah.
more and more you're going to see companies try to provide, like Apple M4. They've already talked about how many neural cores are going to be on there and how optimized it's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if ARM, Apple, NVIDIA, maybe even Intel start shipping more and more towards AI, where a lot of this compute is oriented towards Matmul's tensor operations, so forth. And your average home desktop computer or your average enterprise desktop computer may actually come ready to run these kinds of models because they're coming so damn prevalent, whether you're doing business work or generative work. And certainly people who rely, the Adobe customers that rely on, that are artists that are already kind of working in Blender, working in things that require GPUs, they're a shoo-in for using tools like this as well on the edge. So I definitely see a future where that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised by how good consumer hardware is. Like, our smallest models can run on our gaming PCs as well.
Right.
And on my gaming PC, which has like a 4090 and a pretty good CPU, the overall performance is almost like half as good as what we're seeing on our
Right.
H100 servers.
Yeah, and depending on how you optimize it, or not optimize it, it could be even closer to equal, we found. But I think that the NeurIPS publications came out today on Archive. Um, there were the 300 papers on Archive, and quite a number of them were about inference speedups. So software is still getting better and better. There was a nice paper about time step improvements for diffusion models, where we waste a lot of time in these time steps, and there's a more efficient way to do it. And so there's an improvement every day algorithmically for running inference code. And that means that more and more we need a less powerful chip, and more a gaming chip might do the trick. Of course, there's sort of that paradoxical law. What is it? Something's law. I forgot who it was, where we just tend to end up eating more of that processor. I don't know that that's been the case. I think that law's kind of ended. Windows runs really fast. Microsoft isn't trying to use more of the CPU on Windows. So I think there's a lot of room for algorithmic improvement in GPU software that'll allow for a lot of the stuff to move to the edge. And maybe it's just stuff like video or super high-end, training or something like that has to stay at the server. And that's kind of the way we do real work now, right? I mean, if there's a really complex calculation on a a web browser, maybe it goes to the server, but there's really nothing that complicated that couldn't be done on the edge. And I feel like, that's sort of the way things everywhere works, because quite frankly, I don't want to pay for it. I'd rather do it on the user's machine. Why should I pay for it? It makes my business really, really tricky. And again, for Gupta, where we served up to 400,000 people now, if there was some component that we had to do on our servers, it would be, based on the web app, it would be terrible. Like something like auth or whatever. If we had to get a whole bunch of compute for that, it would be really expensive. Thankfully, everything on JavaScript and HTML and CSS, all that stuff is done right on the user's machine. And with Chrome, it takes a lot of RAM, but it doesn't cost us anything. And I think that's the sort of key thing here. If you want to be an AI, you have to rent these boxes, and it does cost you a lot. And if you could push that to the user, it's a hell of a great business model. So I think that's it. I really appreciate everyone listening. You guys are great. We'll be around. I'm on Twitter. If you need anything, just let me know. Thanks for your support. Make sure you buy 100 credits for $3. I can't believe it's that cheap. That's just so crazy. It's like they're giving it away. I wanted $10, but the guy said, no, Martin, these people are going to be mad at you. They're already mad at you about the drug thing. They're going to be even more mad. Make it $3. I said, okay, you're twisting my arm, but I'll do it. So thanks again. Any suggestions you guys have, we'll work hard to implement them. We're here for you. So just send me some messages. And again, if you send me some cool messages, I'm happy to send you a little bit of crypto as a reward. So make sure you go to the site, and I'll send you $100 if you make some cool stuff and you post it on Twitter, especially if you tag it with Shoggoth and get it popping. I'll send you some crypto as a reward. So thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you soon. Whew, that was a pain in the ass, man. I hate these people. Man, I'm gonna raise the prices too. I don't care about the $100 for a photo. Who gives a fuck? Oh shit, I left the thing on. Fuck.